Volcanoes can be pretty destructive, but people have been trying to tame them for a very long time. As far back as the Roman Empire, they used volcanic heat to warm their public baths. In more recent times, we've harnessed that power to create electricity. Today, several countries use geothermal energy to generate power for their cities. So if you're looking for an alternative energy source that's both abundant and sustainable, volcanoes might just be the answer. Let's take a closer look at how these natural wonders work and how we can use them to produce clean energy. To understand how volcanoes can be used as a source of renewable energy, it helps to know a little bit about what goes on inside the Earth. The Earth's core is unbelievably hot, with temperatures reaching up to 13,000 degrees Celsius. That's about 24,000 degrees Fahrenheit for our friends in the United States. This intense heat is generated by the decay of radioactive elements such as uranium, thorium, and potassium within the Earth's core. The heat then radiates outwards through the mantle and crust of the Earth. Now, this process doesn't happen evenly. Some places, like mid-ocean ridges, where tectonic plates are pulling apart, allow hot magma to rise closer to the surface, while others, like subduction zones, where one tectonic plate slides under another, cause it to sink deeper into the Earth. These variations in heat flow across the Earth's surface, create temperature differences in the rocks below the crust, setting up convection currents that circulate heat from the core to the surface. And it turns out that in some places, like Iceland and Northern California, these areas of high heat coincide with places where the Earth's crust is thin, making it easier for that heat to escape. Voila, geothermal energy. Geothermal energy comes in a few different flavors depending on how deep in the Earth you tap into that heat. The shallow stuff is called low-enthalpy geothermal energy, which can be found relatively close to the Earth's surface. This energy is usually in the form of hot water or steam created when rainwater seeps down through the cracks in the Earth's crust and is heated by the hot rocks below. Now, this heat isn't as hot as the stuff coming from the Earth's core, but it's still significantly warmer than the outside air temperature. This makes it ideal for direct use in things like space heating and industrial processes. For example, in places like Northern California and Iceland, people use this energy to heat their homes and greenhouses. It can even be used to grow crops in places that aren't normally suitable for agriculture, which is pretty cool. A little deeper down, we start getting into the realm of moderate enthalpy geothermal energy. As you go deeper, the temperatures increase, meaning that this energy can be used to generate electricity as well as being used directly for heating purposes. This is because water can be turned into steam at much lower temperatures than the temperatures required to make it hot enough to create electricity. By drilling deeper wells, we can access hotter sources of geothermal energy. But the deeper you go, the hotter the water gets, which can lead to some challenges. At depths greater than 6 kilometers, you get what's known as high-enthalpy geothermal energy. Here, the temperatures are so high that the water has to be pumped down as dry steam or supercritical carbon dioxide in order to avoid turning into steam and blocking the pipes. These are the hottest sources of geothermal energy, and they're typically found in places where there's a lot of volcanic activity. This type of energy is used in places like the geysers in California and the Broadlands and Oahu in New Zealand to generate electricity. So let's talk about how we can actually harness this energy to generate electricity. The basic idea is pretty simple. You drill a hole deep into the earth, insert a pipe and pump water down the hole. The hot rocks will heat the water, which will turn into steam, and that steam will drive a turbine connected to a generator. Voila, electricity. Of course, it's not quite that easy in practice. There are a lot of engineering challenges involved in building a geothermal power plant. For one thing, you need to find a place with suitable geothermal resources. Not every place is going to have the right combination of high heat flow and shallow, permeable rock layers needed to make this type of energy viable. Then there's the challenge of drilling the holes themselves. Drilling deep into the Earth's crust is no easy feat, and the cost of drilling can be prohibitive. Not to mention that you're dealing with extreme temperatures and pressures down there. If something goes wrong, it can be dangerous. Finally, there's the risk of induced seismicity. In other words, drilling into the earth can sometimes trigger earthquakes, which is obviously not ideal. Despite these challenges, geothermal energy is a pretty clean and efficient way to generate electricity. Geothermal power plants have a capacity factor of around 90%, meaning that they can generate electricity continuously without having to worry about things like wind or sunshine. They also emit very little greenhouse gases, which makes them much better for the environment than fossil fuel plants. In fact, geothermal energy is a carbon-neutral source of energy, meaning that it doesn't produce any greenhouse gases during operation. And did I mention that it's also a renewable source of energy? Unlike fossil fuels, geothermal energy is constantly being replenished by the Earth's core. So once you've tapped into a geothermal resource, you can essentially use it forever. In theory, at least in practice, there are some limits. Over time, the amount of water available can decrease, leading to a decline in energy production. But this process takes hundreds or even thousands of years, and it shouldn't be a problem if the resource is managed properly. The best part is that unlike solar and wind power, geothermal energy is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of the weather. It's not going to save us from a cloudy day or a windless day. So if you're looking for a reliable source of clean energy, geothermal is hard to beat. If you're still not sold on geothermal energy, consider this. It's one of the most promising sources of baseload renewable energy, meaning that it can provide a constant supply of electricity, just like a traditional power plant. This is in contrast to intermittent renewable sources like solar and wind, which depend on factors like weather and time of day. Baseload power is essential for a reliable electrical grid, especially as we transition away from fossil fuels. Geothermal energy can play a major role here by providing a stable, sustainable source of baseload power. In addition to its reliability, geothermal energy is also incredibly environmentally friendly. As I mentioned earlier, geothermal power plants emit very few greenhouse gases, and they don't produce any air or water pollution. Plus, they take up a tiny fraction of the land used by other renewable sources like solar and wind farms. This makes them an attractive option for countries and regions that are already feeling the effects of climate change and are looking for ways to reduce their carbon footprint. Some countries have already taken advantage of the benefits of geothermal energy. Iceland, for instance, generates over 25% of its electricity from geothermal sources. They've also used geothermal energy for direct heating purposes, which has helped them reduce their reliance on fossil fuels. Similarly, countries like Kenya and El Salvador have harnessed geothermal energy to provide reliable baseload power for their grids. There are also exciting developments on the horizon for geothermal energy. Researchers are exploring new technologies that could make it easier and cheaper to drill deep into the Earth's crust, potentially opening up new areas for geothermal development. They're also looking at ways to better extract the heat from the Earth, which could increase the efficiency of geothermal power plants. One of the most promising areas of research is enhanced geothermal systems, or EGS. These systems are designed to overcome some of the limitations of traditional geothermal energy by creating their own heat-conducting pathways in areas where natural pathways don't exist. By injecting water into hot rocks, researchers have been able to stimulate geothermal activity and generate electricity in places that were never before considered viable for geothermal energy. It's like turning a cold oven into a pizza oven with a flick of a switch. Well, maybe not quite that easy, but you get the idea. So whether you live in a country with abundant geothermal resources, or you're just looking for a way to reduce your carbon footprint, geothermal energy is definitely worth considering. It's clean, efficient, and reliable. Plus, it's a renewable source of energy that won't produce long-lasting waste products. So next time you hear about a volcano, don't just think of all the destruction it can cause. Think of all the clean energy it could provide as well.